So one of the big secrets about documentary films is that when you're watching them, the editing is invisible. You should be sucked into the film and engaged with the story and then spit out the other side. But what no one tells you is the struggle that you go through in the editing room in order to tell that story seamlessly. It takes a hell of a lot of work to get to that place. So let me ask you a couple of questions that can help reveal what you guys did in order to create what I thought of as a seamless and beautiful story. It's my understanding that your doc took place over, you started working on it for about, you've been working on it for about 5 years.
Yeah.
So can you talk to me a little bit about when you started the editing process?
Yeah, so Nicole said we started in 2013? I don't remember years. Do you remember? What year was that?
That's
Well,
about that.
how many years into actual filming did you start editing?
Yeah, so it was two or 3 years into filming.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what prompted you to actually start the edit at that point?
Well, you know, kind of like the process of creating the first demo, the longer demo, merges with me into the larger editing process.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, one thing I was thinking about when you asked the question was how our relationship on this project started when I was doing some other work with Kindling, and then I would take in the demos to Danny for feedback, right? And then we decided to make it a full partnership.
Yeah, slowly from advisor to
Yeah.
producer and executive producer.
Well, that's an effective demo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I didn't know that we were making it
It
for
hooked
him.
me, that's for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I remember seeing one of your demos at Good Pitch, and it was amazing. Was that the same one that?
No, this was an evolution of that one, but that's Katerina Simic cut that one.
Right.
Me and Kat kind of cut it together, but Katerina was like the driving editor for that.
Yeah, and I came in when I first got to the point where Beck asked me to be more involved actively in helping shape the film was at the end of Katerina's tenure working on the film. She was committed to another project that she had to jump ship to jump into. And we spent 3 days, the three of us, Nicole and Beck and I, in Katerina's apartment watching the material that she had cut. You know, after that, you know, one of the things that about this film that is, and not uncommon to many films, is the progression of people who sort of put their fingerprints on the project as editors and producers. And so she finished, and Beck jumped in sort of as the primary editor for a while. Then we were able to raise some funds and brought on Kenji Yamamoto, who's a editor from the Bay Area, who, you know, his dedication was just amazing. He
slept on my floor.
Exactly,
Yeah.
slept on Beck's floor for a month, literally, on a blow-up mattress.
Yeah. On the office floor, the same floor he edited.
Right, exactly.
Wait, you let him sleep?
Exactly.
I found he was better when he slept.
Exactly, although he was definitely immersed.
Very hard worker.
Yes, and you know, I mean, I remember hearing the stories from back, you know, that they'd be having dinner and they'd hear the sound, you know, wafting up, and then they'd get up in the morning and still hear the sound wafting up from up downstairs. So Kenji came in, and then Kenji had to leave, and then Rebecca picked it up again, and then Kenji came back again. And then at that point is when we started to move towards needing to finish the film.
Yep.
We were forced to say it's time to finish because we had been accepted for the premiere at Hot Docs. And at that point, Rebecca really jumped in like completely full time.
Yeah, we ran out of money. There's
Well, that's
small
too.
difference. We ran out of
Yes.
money for Kenji before that.
Yeah. But then we had to finish the film. And
Then I had to submit it to Hot Docs.
That's right.
That was, yeah.
Anyways, we spent, and at that point I really started spending a lot more time with Rebecca in the editing room over the course of 2 months or 3 months. You know, first a day here and a day there, an hour here, an hour there, and then 2 or 3 days a week, and you know, until we finally got to the end. And of course, feedback screenings and screenings, you know, sharing it with Nicole and the rest of the team and getting their notes and working with Mary. We worked with a story consultant. So there were a lot of, it's a collaborative process.
It's a process. It's definitely a process. Well, if you don't mind me sort of stepping back in time a little bit. You started editing the film a little bit yourself, right? Can you talk a little bit
The
about
demo,
what the difficulties are in terms of editing your own material?
Well, it's funny because I've historically always edited my own material. I mean, for the nonprofit, I'm kind of like a one-woman band background, or at least make sure I have sound. Referencing the prior
Sound
panel.
is very important.
I don't like to do my own sound.
Yeah.
That's my worst nightmare. Yeah, so I'm almost more used to cutting my own shooting than not. But the challenge of it is perspective, I would say. And so that's what, in the last time we talked about the fluidity of roles, and I think that we had a huge amount of that in post as well. Because when I had to sit in the editor's seat, I really couldn't be in the director's seat in the same way. And so, I mean, I had my own feelings about what I felt was important, like any editor would, right? But I had to have the outside perspective that Danny brought, as well as just like the big picture structural stuff is really important, I think. So it was really valuable for me to be able to step into that editing world and to have still other people like Danny or Mary Manhart also, or all the other people who gave us feedback to have the distance.
How did you decide what to start editing on your film?
Well, that's a hard question. I don't feel like I have honestly a clear memory of that.
Well, you started with the demo.
Yeah, so I mean, in the demo we were just trying to show, our three subjects and kind of what their quests were, right? And then just kind of constantly refining it till what we got to at the version that you saw at Good Pitch, which is, and then now we have our newer, I think that our new trailer even evolves out of that older demo.
Right.
So.
My recollection is that when I started being more involved, it was it was like a chronological, just setting out what happened. This happened, and then this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and then starting to identify what each of those characters' quests were and shape those quests, and then dealing with the chronology, which was breaking chronology. And rearranging things.
Are we supposed to be admitting to people that we actually break chronology?
Exactly. Yes, reality is not really reality.
It's the deeper truth.
Exactly. So yeah, and that I think was a big piece of also just being able to, like you said, give it the seamless feel and move people, as you said, from through the experience and from story to story in a way that was seamless and emotionally resonant and flowing, compelling in that way.
Well, okay, so do you want to get into the nitty-gritty of the actual, some of the larger struggles that you had in terms of the film? I know, because we've talked about this before, that and because this is also something that's very common, when you're cutting a doc, that the beginning tends to be something that you have to always be re-examining, because you want to draw your audience in as quickly as possible. Do you want to talk a little bit about that part of the film and your process on that?
Why don't we show it and then talk about it, or you want to talk after?
Do you want to talk about what it was and then talk about what it is, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, for a long time we were trying to find a scene to start with, right? To just throw people kind of into the middle, of the experience in just a live action scene. And we kept trying different scenes and trying to find that scene that could fill that role, and we just never could. And so then we showed it for feedback to a lot of people, including you. And you kind of took us out of that sort of, said, okay, well, if you're now working to find a scene, like how else, what's another approach? And so it's trying to find a different way that's, I think feels in certain ways more trailery, just kind of setting up some quick little hooks for people to sort of draw them into our three characters and the big picture. Was then the tack that we took, and then of course that evolved through many different structures. And I think maybe after watching it, then we could talk about things that we changed, that used to be one way, and then the reasons we changed them.
That would be great.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just load up the opening. All right. So now I'm going to kind of scrub through it and talk about the different components of this. And you guys jump in. But so at the beginning, starting with something that feels very intimate, you're not totally sure what you're seeing yet. So it's kind of the question, right? You're intrigued. That's the goal as a viewer. What is this? It's kind of funny. You see that she's drawing. For those who can make sense of this image, not every viewer can, but it's a traditional habit. And so, okay, we start to get a sense that there's some kind of conflict going on, and who's involved. It's kind of a funnier sign, right, that will tie to our next scene. So they made the signs, now they're out with them. None of these people are our core characters. So we started with people who are kind of secondary characters rather than one of our main subjects, but they're helping set up the big picture stakes, right? So these first two sections, this and the news, right, is giving you a very big picture idea of what's going on. And then this is also still following along those lines, right? We're about to get some information, trying to keep it very concise, just enough context. I think we added these cards in late. That's, for me anyway, pretty typical of, and I think for you too, like pretty typical of my sensibility is like try to not do that for as long as possible, and then just say, okay, what do we need, and only provide what we need. Okay, so this is, context. But we've already had a few kind of humorous, fun moments, right, before we gave people this kind of, we didn't overly front load exposition, so just enough and still not at the very beginning. Okay, so this is more news happening, a little bit more information, trying to convey it again in a way that's concise. And a lot of audiences laugh at this line because it feels very strange that this is going on. So it's shocking in a humorous way, this information. Okay, then Chris responds. So we've set up this large, big picture issue, and then we have one of our characters or subjects responding about what it means for her, and she's taking them on right away, right? She's saying, what do they mean by feminist? And yes, I am going to claim that role, even though I know it's, according to these people, dangerous for me to do so, that we're being investigated for doing so. She's going to do it anyway. Okay, then Simone comes in to also offer another counterpoint to the motive for the investigation, right? She's saying that they're trying to their vision of a faith and spirituality. There's one vision of faith and spirituality that's being imposed by the institution, right? That's about rules. Some people are closer to God, some people are further from God, some people are in the club, some people are out of the club. And for Simone is saying that's not what faith is. It's about being connected to each other. It's about compassion. It's about walking our prayer. So she's setting that up, and we're setting up her. For each of them, we're also setting up what their narratives are going to be about later. So Chris is taking on patriarchy in the church, right? And she took that on in her first line. Simone is showing, she's going to, throughout the story of the film, she's going to use this investigation as an opportunity to further her social service and social justice mission, and to spotlight social needs. That's what her narrative is about. So,
the activist.
Yeah. And then Jean, Jean's role is
she's in the trenches.
Yeah, she's in the trenches.
Face to face.
But
person
I would,
to person.
Yeah, and in this open, I think that Jean's statement functions as just something on a super personal level.
Yeah.
So, Chris and Simone have both made these big picture statements that are personal to them, but Jean gets even more personal.
She's the heart of the film.
Yeah, she's the heart, right. So she's saying the Spirit is speaking through all of us, or none of us. I think, right, that's what she says here. Oh yeah, no, that's not what she says there. Well, that's part of it. Anyway, she's facing it on a personal level, then a little bit more information just drizzled in, setting up again the stakes, right? What could happen? What could come out of this? And then we have Jean continuing on the line of the stakes. What if they say that we're not Catholic anymore? So she's asking a question. What could happen? Simone, the same thing. So for each of them at the end now they're asking a question that's going to lead into the film. That's going to lead into the story, and the story is going to, on some level, either answer that question or just further it or complicate it. But that's what motivates us to keep watching. So I would say that in a lot of ways this open is like a trailer in a lot of ways, but the way that I think it's different is that in terms of what the part of the story that we're telling, it all is collapsed into one point in time. It's all about that early moment in time.
The starting point for the narrative historically.
Yeah. And yeah.
I think one of the other things that led us to this point, when what you were saying about before about looking for the scene and hoping to find the scene, was also coming to the realization that this is a film about 3 characters, and that we really worked hard in the open to create a sense of balance between them, because Simone in particular is a media celebrity, or a lot of people know who she is. You know, she was, especially when the film was being shot and coming out, Nuns on the Bus was all over the place, and she was, on Colbert and, wherever. She was all over the place. So, and she's a very dynamic person. So, making sure that she doesn't take over, making sure that Chris, who's
because at one point
more
we had
subtle.
a scene that started with Simone.
Right, exactly.
And there was a fear because of what's going on right now that people will think, oh, this is the movie.
The Nuns on the Bus
Simone.
movie.
Yeah.
So I think there was really that effort in the trailer also to sort of give them a level playing field to start, and to sort of set that expectation from the beginning, so that flows throughout the film.
I think you were remarkably successful at connecting us in a kind of a personal way with each of your characters. Even if we didn't know who they were, we kind of felt their commitment, and we liked them, and we felt the stakes. I feel the stakes there. So I really felt ready for the rest of the film when we got done with that. So congratulations on being able to arrive at that. At what point did you finally get your first scene sort of like?
I think that was definitely one of the last things.
The open?
We changed it. I was changing it at the last minute, right before the premiere.
Tweaking. Definitely, moving, choosing different pieces of VO, switching the order around. There were a number of places where we, took the one clause and, to the very last moment.
But one thing I was thinking about too in looking through this was how with each of their bites, like once it kind of landed on, okay, this structure is basically, this idea is something that we think we can push forward with and is going to work, was also a lot about like making sure that 2 of them weren't hitting the same note, that we were distinguishing them as characters. And I think back about Simone's voiceover line, that was one of the ones, or not voiceover, but in the interview, that changed. And it used to be a comment about how her community has a lot of social workers, and they have a lot of psychology degrees. And so when this came out, they felt they were using that skill set to see that this was the Vatican kind of scapegoating them as a result of the experience with the sex abuse lawsuits. And it was not the right piece there at all. It was there for a while. It was
juicy, but it wasn't the right piece.
It was juicy,
right,
but it wasn't
like,
the heart. It wasn't what the film is about.
Right.
It wasn't the heart of the story. So it was really trying to get back to like what is the big picture message that this is about. And also, Chris's line is defiant in a similar way. I think that is. It's not building on it.
Can I just bounce off of that for a second to ask you about your struggles in terms of working with the footage from Bishop Paprocki? Because he he's an interesting subject in the film. Well, not subject, but commenter, in that even though I disagreed with everything that he was saying, me personally, that I don't think that you demonized him. And I think when you're making a film that you feel strongly about, you know, with a certain viewpoint, that's a struggle that you have to, you know, contend with in the edit room a lot. Can you talk a little bit about the ethical issues there, or?
Yeah. So one thing that you also made me think of is that he was in this open for a long time. And we got feedback from Judith Helfand. We got feedback to take him out.
Yeah.
And we struggled with it for a while because it was like, how do we do this, set up the stakes without him? He's the voice of this institution. And we found a way, and I think it was really good advice.
Agree. Yeah.
Because again, this sets you up in like the heart of the film, and his role is not that role in the film.
It's really about them. It's not about the church.
Yeah. But I would say, you know, the biggest thing for me in thinking about two things with Paprocki. I mean, definitely wanting to. You don't want sort of a straw man kind of. You know, you want to be having some real dialogue to be happening in the film. But this film really is about the sisters, and so being very careful, like just to use. Similar to how we talk about the cards, right? The text cards, like just using him when needed for context or to illustrate the stakes or what the sisters are engaging with within the institutional church. And then the other big thing is like, you know, we talk about how when I'm editing the sisters' interviews and creating voiceover out of them, I'll take a lot of liberties with it if I feel that I'll transform what they were saying in that particular sentence in that particular moment if I feel that it's true to their larger story, and then also check in with them about that later, and we can dig into that more if that's of interest to people. But with Paprocki, you did not do that at all. And with him, it was very much like, how do we synthesize this? How do we you know, make it most effective and impactful, but it's not. There was no license to change. Yeah,
at the very end of the film, we went back to the original transcripts,
double checked all of it,
and took the script of the film, an ethics check, and we put them side by side to see, you know, we maybe cut out a word, an and, whatever, but we really, Rebecca really made it a point to stick to what he said. And there was some talk also just about, you know, him being a part of this film, and you know, we came about the footage in a sort of serendipitous way, and what was that going to feel like, and what the response would be. So that, in particular, that sort of ethical check, you know, making sure that, you know, ethically as filmmakers, which is something that's really important to us. Personally and professionally, that we were, you know, we were aware that we were coming up against.
And we had to change the line.
We had to think about it.
Very tight deadline.
Right, but that, you know, we didn't want to cross that line. We really wanted to.
So when we were doing that check, and we were looking at the film and then looking back at the full transcript of his edit, what we found was that there was a place, and I don't remember the specifics anymore, but there was a place, because you're having people respond to each other, right, sometimes. And so where he was saying, I think, it was relevant to what the prior person had said, but it could be read differently in response.
Didn't necessarily mean how to respond
to that. It didn't respond to that comment. It responded to another idea.
Right.
And it was just enough off that we were like, we need to fix it. And so then it was and that was not an. So I think sometimes the ethical thing to do is really the hard, not the easy thing to do, because then we were under a time constraint. We had a lot to do to finish the film in order for it to premiere, you know, be ready to premiere, and then we had to figure out, like, what else could we put here? Like, hopefully we have something else to go here.
Right.
Well, I understand you had 500 hours of footage.
300.
300 hours of footage. That's significant. So hopefully there's something in. Yeah. Clearly you found what you needed. When you showed the film to the sisters, then they felt very comfortable with it as well.
Yeah. So they saw it at two phases. They saw it at a rough cut phase. Just once we sort of felt like we had the structure basically together, the film basically made sense. We showed it to them. and the only person who wanted something taken out, so we can talk about this, right, is because for me I feel like, because different filmmakers have very different approaches. Some people, like, their subjects see the film for the first time at the premiere.
Oh, no.
In the audience.
Yeah.
I think it's not a good idea.
I agree.
But so for me, I feel like the subjects have taken a huge risk. That this is not like being in a TV news story. This is they're giving a lot of themselves to you, and they don't have to give everything, right? There's things that they can hold for themselves, and so for me, it's really important to hear them out if there's something that they don't want in there. And you have to ask yourself the question, you know, you have to maintain your journalistic integrity, right? That you have to ask, you don't just necessarily accept whatever they say. You don't give them editorial control to edit the film about themselves, right? But you'll consider it. And so Sister Jean's one thing was there was a shot that I loved of her smoking a cigarette. She wanted
was
it
a heavy
out.
smoker.
Oh, that was in that demo.
That used to be in the
That
trailer.
was
in the
demo.
trailer. Yeah,
People
that was
loved
great.
that in the demo.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, roaring laughter.
Roaring
it's-
laughter.
That was great.
It was important for me, and it worked well in that demo.
Right.
Because it's
Breaks the
showing that it's
stereotype.
subverting your expectations.
Right.
That many people have of a nun, but Jean, she had quit smoking at that point. And it wasn't that we didn't tell the story of her journey to quit smoking. So it wasn't reflected in the film. And she got some. It was. I'll leave a lot of the detail out about it. It's interesting. I'd be happy to
spoilers.
share it, but I won't take too much time with it.
But we did take it out.
I'm glad
We took it out.
I'm glad
Yeah.
that you brought that up because I was always kind of wondering where that went in the film.
Where did
So
it go?
because it was kind of an enjoyable, like
Yeah.
you said, subversion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the only thing. And for me, it was like, you see in the film, Jean, she was very free with
yeah.
what she
Very.
would say.
Yeah.
And there was stuff that when I sat with her in her apartment, watching her watch the rough cut, I was like nauseous. I
I'm
was so
sweating,
scared she
yeah.
was gonna want to take out the most important scenes because I knew they were hard scenes and they were challenges within her community and like.
Crisis of
and she
faith.
was like, that is important. That
Right.
was her reaction to the scenes I was afraid of.
Right.
And then it was just take the smoking. I was like, well, that is the least I can do for you.
Right.
Yeah. That's great. Well, going back to showing scenes, because I just think it's so interesting to have that analysis available. I remember an earlier cut that I saw where the whole Nuns on the Bus section started much sooner. And in this cut, it comes in later, and it's really well motivated and beautiful. Can you talk to me, I don't know if you want to show it first or talk about how all that changed, or...
Yeah, well, the Nuns on the Bus had a lot of momentum, right? When you watch that footage, I mean, they're taking a bus trip across the country. It's a very natural thing to use as a narrative spine. And so at a certain point, we did have it much earlier just because it was like, an easy way to like drive everything.
Yeah.
But it wasn't working quite right. And it also goes back to what you were saying is that, this is not just the story of the Nuns on the Bus. And
I think we also had an opportunity because it was so dynamic and it has that sort of pick up and go that, films, documentaries
use it.
have a natural
Yes.
rhythm and sort of cycle, and that there usually is a point once you've set up the stakes and you've set up the characters and everything is no longer new and fresh, that the film can take a dip in energy. So using it, I think we're able to turn something that was like, let's not let this story and the dynamics and her dynamic character take over the film. We were able to use that in a way that in that moment was able to pick the film up and give it momentum into the next section.
Yeah.
So I think that was really, fortuitous sort of being able to see the sort of the silver lining in that.
And I think this is also a case, though, where actually the real chronology was more effective. Because we actually put it, this is the case where we put it back into chronology.
Ah, okay.
So you were saying, it was funny, you were saying when you came in, it was chronological. I don't think it was. It just wasn't as effective. But that's a case where, because the Nuns on the Bus was really picking up momentum from all the, you know, you saw the signs that they were making at the beginning. There were those kinds of vigils across
Everywhere.
the country. And there was this tremendous momentum, and there was a lot of news coverage about the Vatican's investigations. There were people rising up in support, and networks, well, I won't talk about it because actually this is in the, if I'm going to show it, then I won't say it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think one thing that's, should I do that? Can I do the scrub through again? Was
Yeah,
that
sure.
effective? Okay. Tell me if it wasn't effective. Okay. I think one thing that we did struggle with a lot in setting up the Nuns on the Bus, right, was because we had footage about them making the decision to do it, and then, you know, all the lead up, the prep work that they did, and it was like pretty cool that we had it because all the news stations just followed the bus. Everyone else just, you know, so it was like, well, we have this thing, nobody else has it, but we still was better for that was the killing your baby kind of thing, I guess.
Right.
It was better for the film still not to do that. And so we set it up. There's a lot of points in the film where somebody asks a question at the end of their scene, and then another character responds to it in the intro of their scene. This is a case of Simone doing it in her own, right? Or it's still transitioning between scenes, I guess. But how do we leverage all this momentum we see out here for the work of network? And then she asks the question, how do we do it? That's all we needed, you know, from their decision-making process. And then the bus, we just see the bus, and that's the answer.
So that line of hers, was that from a scene while they were trying to talk about it, or was that during an interview, or?
I don't know. Was it an interview?
For sure.
And I don't even know, though, if that line was even about nuns on the bus. That's what I'm talking about with the liberties, right? I was piecing. I know that I was piecing together a lot of lines.
I think it was. I think it was about the nuns on the bus. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Maybe you never saw it before, though.
No, I remember. I remember seeing it. I'm pretty sure.
But having been at those, you know, planning meetings, you knew that line was shorthand for how that all actually happened. So when Simone saw it, she recognized that, I mean, it was true.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the lines with this manipulating lines thing, I mean, it's very innocuous stuff like that a lot of the time, and they don't even think about whether it was true or not. It feels true. It feels reasonable that they would have said that. So that's the test, I think,
Right.
of whether it works and is from a journalistic. We're not trying to be journalists, but, you know, from a storyteller's perspective, and from you know, our responsibility to our subject's
Right.
perspective.
That's really
that
the
it's
issue.
fair.
It's about the trust that, you know, Rebecca worked for years with these three characters. She followed them for years. She became close with them. She built up over years the trust that they were, as she said, willing to open themselves up and share and really put themselves out there. And so they trust her to, you know, to represent them. And so it's not about the word, this word or that word. It's like what you were saying before. It's about being true to who they are and what their mission is and, you know, what their heart is. So.
Yeah. And I think, so the other thing that I think is effective too, that changed in terms of how so we used to have them sitting around having a meeting, right, deciding to do Nuns on the Bus. Oh, well, this would be a good way to respond to Paul Ryan's budget, and like figuring all that out. But instead, because we felt the need to get that kick that momentum off, that we were able to seed that backstory information into, right? So they go on the bus, they have a small Vérité or live action moment, right, where they're just engaging with each other, putting on their stickers. I think it's very sweet. And then only then, while we're on the bus, she brings us in to Ryan, and then we bounce right back, you know, to their journey.
And then she fills us in even more about the context in this next scene. And the scene that you're actually talking about, that meeting scene, I believe, we did use it, and we took it out of chronology. Isn't that at the beginning of, wasn't that the same day when we are introduced to network? Isn't that the same meeting?
Maybe it is, yeah.
Yeah, so we did use the meeting with, you know, sort of setting up the organization earlier, you know, and
it wasn't about that.
It wasn't
right?
about
We had
that.
to
It was just
change
about
the context.
introducing the organization and what they do, and getting to see Simone in her role as you know, an executive director.
And one other thing related to this piece with putting him here is that before, when it was in with the meeting and they were deciding, you know, we talked about how we lost the momentum. But actually putting him there raises it another level, because now it's an opportunity for her to respond to him.
And the national
go
stakes.
Yeah.
So actually, we have a microphone that's set up in the back, so that those of you who have questions and want to address your questions to the filmmakers, please feel free to just go up to the mic and step up, and we'll be happy to continue the dialogue that way. And in the meantime, while people are thinking of their questions, I wanted to ask you, because personally, I've never worked with a story consultant before, and I want to know a little more about what that experience was like.
That was awesome. That was awesome. And I've heard other people that haven't always had awesome experiences. So this was at the stage where we didn't have money, and you know, kind of made a decision. I was getting feedback from somebody, from Judith Helfand, and she said, "Okay, well, I know you can cut, so do it, and then work with somebody else, somebody from, you know, who can bring sort of the spirit that you're looking for." So it was a very good pairing. Mm-hmm. So what was cool about Mary was that, you know, what cool about the relationship for me was that she was a very senior editor. And had a really good sense of fun and justice. And for me, even though at the time I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to dive into the edit anymore. Mm-hmm. I want to hand this off. I wish we had money. Was that I ended up getting a tremendous education, because I was the boots on the ground in the edit, right? Mm-hmm. I was actually doing most of the physical editing. And then Mary was watching cuts and providing feedback, structural things or little things for a scene, and then I would go in and implement it and show it to her, and it just worked out. It was a good pairing. I think that was the thing.
How long did you guys work together? Were you together for like a week or a couple of days?
It was on and off for a while.
It was over the course of a month, probably adding up to, or a month and a half, probably adding up to like 5 days or something.
Okay.
And I think that particularly because, as we were talking about before, Rebecca was editing the film. There was and then I was very entrenched and in it. And then we were getting feedback sort of locally, like from people like you and other filmmakers and colleagues, you know, who were watching the film, giving us quick feedback. To have that those fresh eyes in that critical moment, who wasn't just fresh eyes once, but was fresh eyes, you know, sort of could spend the sustained time with Rebecca, who wasn't me, who was, you know, like, you know, we had sort of gotten to a place where we were like, you know, and so it sort of freed up the process, bringing another thing, and brought a lot of new creative juice into the room. It was definitely using. And I'm using them. I'm using, not her, but I'm using Story Consultant now on another project, and it's scriptness. It's really interesting.
We need to talk more about that. Okay. We have a gentleman who would like to ask a question.
Hi, my name's Mansour. I'm a DC major here in DePaul. Just have a quick questions regarding documentary. First question is, with the development of cinematic tools overall, new cameras, new stuff, and access to more affordable, low-budget cameras, and with the introduction of documentary series in Netflix, like Chef's Table, and like there's another one called Giro's Dream of Sushi that got nominated for an Oscar. Yeah. There was like a new sense of like a documentary. Documentaries could be told in a fictional structure, but still technically remain a documentary. Do you think? What's your opinion about that? Do you think it's a thing yet, or do you think this could in future revolutionize the idea of documentaries? This is my first question. I have another question.
That's a tough one. Well, I would say that documentaries are certainly at a moment, a turning moment potentially, an evolutionary moment maybe is a better word to put it. I mean, I think the three of us come out of traditional Vérité, character-driven documentary filmmaking, which takes a level of commitment and a level of time and patience and whatever else you want to do that is counter-cultural to the prevailing media landscape. So, and at the same time, with web video and the kinds of things that you're talking about, and reality television, all those things are bouncing up against what traditional documentaries look like. So there's certainly an evolution that's happening, and whether we like it or not, I happen to like it. I think it's interesting, and I'm like to engage in that, but that's what's going to happen. So I don't know whether what you're talking about, I'm not familiar with the particular series you're talking about, but I certainly think that we're at a moment where you'll see documentaries taking many different and new shapes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just sat in on a VR session earlier this week. That was really interesting too.
I just have another question. When dealing with a protagonist in a documentary, do you treat them, say in a fictional movie, you treat them as talents? So, for example, they get paid per hour or whatever. What's the approach for that in documentary when potentially a person gets rewarded, or if that's a way to describe it, in a documentary? What's like the...
You can do this.
From an ethics perspective, we don't pay.
Okay.
Reality TV sometimes pays.
Right. The idea is that once you've made a payment, that there's a quid pro quo, that the subject has has a different kind of investment in the project, that they're going to do what you want them to do, that you're directing them like you would in a feature.
Yeah.
Whereas in a documentary, the whole point is not to tell them what to do, right? Just to be there and experience it with them. Mm-hmm. So that's where the ethical piece comes, that you don't want to pay them. They get rewarded in other ways, notoriety, and people know they are, and they get paid to come to festivals and get their rooms and whatever. In other words, they can have fun as a result, and gain notoriety or help their cause. I think our subjects definitely feel that we've helped their cause. The film has helped their cause, and that's what they were in it for.
Yeah, and it's not like we really have most, at least social issue documentaries, really have money to pay anybody anyway.
Although it can create some controversy because people want to be paid, and we have to explain to them that that's not how it works.
Right, definitely.
Well, sometimes with any media, people assume there's more money behind it than there is, and so sometimes, you've got to help people understand what the actual economics are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have time for one more question if anybody else wants to step up.
Thank you very much. My name is Liz, and I am strictly a consumer. I'm not involved in the production, the conception of documentaries in any way. And the discussion about editing is so intriguing for me. Do you have any advice for me as a consumer of documentaries? What guidelines are there for someone like me who wants to believe what I'm seeing? Now, I have a lot of trust in your documentary. We also, disclaimer, we did support it.
Yeah, thank you.
Financially.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Part of the crowd. But again, I'm so intrigued. Are there any guidelines for a consumer?
That question makes me think of something from Gordon Quinn. About in Cartoon Quinn documentaries, he says, he always likes to have something that shows you this is constructed. So letting the boom mic, maybe, I'm not in every documentary, but seeing the mic on the pole kind of brush across the corner of a frame where you might normally edit it out. So I think that it's totally appropriate to believe what you're watching and to follow it, because I think, if you place your trust in the filmmakers, that I think that we're worthy of that trust, and that it doesn't have to be everything doesn't have to be completely literal, because you can't be there all the time, right? If you could be there all the time, you probably could be literal and everything somebody says matches exactly with what the VO, the interview that they gave you, but
No,
we
you've
have
got
to pull it.
You've
be a
got
long
90
film.
minutes or
Yeah.
something to take 300 hours of footage and to find the truth of that within that 90 minutes. That was a great question, and thank you for being a consumer of documentaries,
Can
by
I
the
just
way.
add one? Can I add one thing?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
please.
I think that you're, yes, there's the trust that you have you know, there's a trust that you come in and we all want you to suspend your disbelief. That's what movies are about, fiction or nonfiction. But that, you know, there's a context to it as well, and that it's, you know, especially today where it is so easy to manipulate material and media, and, you know, we see it in our political campaigns, we see it in our television, we see it in reality television. I mean, it's pervasive. The idea of educating a literate viewership that understands that it is not real and that it's not constructed, that it is constructed, is hugely important. And I think that that has to do with context and understanding who the people are that are in the film and who the people are that are making the film and what their motivations are. What do they want from you? What do the producers want from the viewers? Those are all really important questions to have, not necessarily when you're sitting in the theater before or after. You know, those are important questions to ask.
Yeah, well, I think even, I mean, I think I guess it's a tough position, because I think from a media literacy perspective, you want people to have it when they're sitting in the theater. But from a storytelling perspective, you don't.
Absolutely true.
So that's why the mic floats across the frame, so you can have that second, oh, you're okay, the movie is being made, and then you can get back into the story. So maybe you can get in and out of it
Still
a little
doesn't
bit.
tell you what the motivation is.
No,
So
but you know that it's being, you know that
yes,
it's not
yes,
just
yes, you're
reality.
aware of that it's not reality. Yeah.
And there's a lot of controversy that surround certain films about those kinds of things. So if you're interested in trying to find out about that, you can just do some searching and see if there are any articles or if that's being, you know, pounced on a little bit too.
Right.
But, well, this was great. I have so many more questions to ask you guys, but thank you so much for being here today, and thank you so much for coming today. And I hope you enjoyed the film.
Yeah,
So.
enjoy.